Hi, this is Eckhart from the Frankfurt Schema Therapy Institute again, with another tutorial for you. The one today is about the neurobiological underpinnings of our information processing. And I will go into some of the details, showing you some slides. It's a bit a longer video, but maybe it helps you to understand how your brain is actually working and what conclusions we draw for our therapeutic approach. Let's start with a little practical exercise. So if you see nothing now, you're right. Because I want to ask you to go into an observer state, something which is connected with the healthy adult functioning. Observe what's going on inside of you while the process happens. So you are present now in an observer stance, and you're also present as the observer watching the empty screen. And please realize now how your tension, your emotional activation varies or changes while I'm talking and starting to bore you a little bit. So usually your tension goes up a little bit now, unless I start the video. And if I start the video now, the tension might even grow. But now look what happens. Okay. Did you realize how your tension dropped down very steeply in the moment when you realize the content of the image? And that's an important perception, because our brain is lingering to create symbols, to make meaning out of a fuzzy perception. We don't like fuzzy perceptions. We want to have a word, a symbol, an explanation for what's going on there. And this is what we call a relational frame. We try to connect an experience state with a kind of an issue, a name, something to make meaning out of it. And this is not only a bad thing, because it helps us to react quickly on something approaching us. I will go to that in a minute in more detail. But right now, you realized your tension went down after you realized these feet. Okay, next step. How do these feet appear to you? Are they an imprint in the sand, or do you see them more in a convex way, looking out of the image? I expect that most of you perceive the feet as prominent. And now watch your tension. Usually the tension goes up a little bit because you realize, yeah, that's a bit odd, because usually, well, who made these feet? Who took the burden to carve all these silly feet out of the sand, and especially these footprints there? So this is not very likely. And you might start doubting your perception a little bit. But what you realize is that you are inclined to stick with your perception. You like to justify it. And in the workshop, sometimes people say, yeah, maybe there's somebody buried in the sand and you just see the feet. And that's interesting, because it's starting to get a little bit paranoid. Because how do you think this person would feel down there buried in the sand? But exactly, that is what happened in a paranoid state. People can't perceive the information. They get in a fuzzy activation state. They don't like that. And they favor having a wrong explanation than no explanation. Because creating these relational frames, creating these symbols, creating explanations is a driver of our brain activities. Okay, so I irritated you a little bit. I want to do it even a bit more, because I'm sure that some of you actually see footprints, and some of you might change between these two perceptions, because actually it's a tilted image. It's a photograph, and I know the photographer. There are footprints. The image is an image of footprints, believe it or not. Okay, you see, you start struggling with me, but I know better. They are footprints. So if there are footprints, you should be able to see that. Did you see what happens with your tension? It goes up again, and you start not liking me. And that's what happens in therapy as well, because we guide the clients into perceptions, into states they don't like, into schema activation states. And that's important, because otherwise you can't change them. But now you need my help. You need my help to change, to tilt the image. And if you do what I tell you, it will work. So look at the heel, because the picture was taken very late in the evening and the sun came in very, very low. So this is the corner, the edge where the footprint pressed the sand together. You see the heel compressing the sand, and the sand is a bit tighter here than is there, a bit more dense. You can see how the edge creates the shadow, because this is deeper than the surface of the sand, and this is why there's a shade, because there's no light coming in these mold where the heel is. Okay, were you able to change the image? Don't go to the toes, because when you go to the toes, the image will immediately flip back into the prominent image. So, but maybe you manage to see the footprint, the imprinted foot, and then your tension will go down again and you feel relief. You will feel good because you got a new view on these feet. And in another video I already mentioned, this is what helps us to grow mentally, to increase our experience from the world, to get a more differentiated view in terms of the broaden and build theory. And then with the more attractors, the more representations of perceptions we have, the richer is our experience and the more differentiated our view of ourselves and the world. Okay, that's what we saw with the feet. Now, there might be some of you who still not have been able to tip over, and you won't like me. So I have to help you. I have to give you a second chance. And this is what I'll do now with another image. Now you can do it. Black faces, wide ways, and you can flip back and forth. But even now, if you connect with your feeling inside when tipping the image over, there is like a little bump, you know? It's not a flat, smooth movement. It's like in tipping over. And this is why we called it a tilted image, because it's a little jump to the other side. And this is caused by the change of the networks. The faces and the vase are represented in different networks, and you change between the networks, and this is a little bit burdensome, and you feel this stress to change between the images. And I'll show you in another slide what happens when we change, or I'll show you a slide covering the whole process that we work through now with these tilted images. And you can see on the left side, this is the tension of our activation, mirroring the activation of our nervous system. And this is the timeline. So in the beginning, when you saw the fuzzy feet, you were activated. There was a higher tension when you had to proceed on this new perception. And once you realized, these are feet, I know that, your tension goes down very fast, or the same happened with the vase, of course. When you see the vase, your tension goes down. But when you want to tip over to the faces or to the impressed feet, you have to get active and cross this fluctuative state, which is again activating our nervous system and makes it a kind of unstable. And we don't like that. But we need some effort to be able to turn the page over to the other side where the faces are. And this is what we feel. So when we work with clients, it's the same thing. The clients come from a discomfortable state in their past, a schema they build up in childhood, and then they develop some kind of schema coping and coping modes, how to deal with these activations. And they got, to some extent, they were helpful. But over the course of time, because they get kind of stuck in these coping modes, they don't develop further. They become more dysfunctional or more maladaptive, at least. And in therapy now, we ask them to get into this activation state again, into these fuzzy feelings, into these negative feelings, connect with the schema. But now we help them to develop a more functional, a more adult coping mode. And again, with this adult coping mode, the tension will go down again. And finally, the result will be better compared to the automatic coping mode. Like if you have a navigation system, always guiding you into the old path. You need your healthy adult mode. You need to put some effort into your information processing and say, no, I don't want to follow this navigation system blindly, because maybe overnight they changed the sense of the street and now it became a one-way street, and if you go there you might get into trouble. So whatever your navigation system, your coping modes tell you, stop, get into the adult mode, take the burden of a second look, connect with your values, with your needs, and make a sound decision. Is that really the best way to do it? Or will I tip over and take the path of the new, more functional coping mode? And this is what our clients have to train. In session, we help them to develop a new path. But outside the session, they have to get this standing up, getting out of the activation, reappraise, and then take the road which leads them to a better outcome. But now, towards the end of my talk today, I want to give you some additional information about how our brain works and why we are tending to get stuck in our accustomed coping modes, because there is some rigidity in the brain. And this is a simple reason. You know, our brain is built up by these neurons, and we have about 15 billion neurons, and they are with about 10,000 connections, each of them connected with other neurons. But the surprising part is that 97% of these connections are not going to a perception sense, but they are connected within itself. So 97% of the connections are connected with other neurons inside our brain, and only 3% guide us to a kind of a perception, any kind of perception. So we are very much in our own stew, and this creates a certain rigidity, which again is not only bad, because picture yourself entering your bathroom in the morning. There's a person looking at you from the mirror. You're not surprised because you know, yeah, that's me. But this is something you have to build up in this central part of your brain where you build up your sense of self. Your dog won't be able to do that. When your dog enters the bathroom and sees the dog, it will bark. You don't, because you know, oh, that's me. But this is the positive part of our continuity of our self-images. So this creates a kind of stability. But the other problem is, because we know so much, we have so many attractors, we have so many schemas, we have so many prepared blueprints how to interpret the current moment experience. We are very much stuck in our old patterns, in our old experiences. And with some last slides, I want to illustrate that to you. So what do you see now? I bet that most of you won't see very much, but you will be able, from these small lines, you will be able to identify the shape of a pear, and that's the pear. But that's one of the benefits of our pre-existing blueprints in our brain, our attractors, that we know, okay, this must be a pear. The problem is you will always see the pear following these lines. You're not very flexible. Your brain will tell you that's a pear. And in the last step, I will show you another image. And this image, again, builds up slowly, so you can see what happens, like we did it with the feet. So if we start now, you can see the fuzzy dots, and now suddenly you identify the dog. And the problem is, once you identified the dog in this image, you will never be able to not see the dog. You can't undo it. So when you have the shape of the pear, you will always see the pear. When you have the experience of the dog, you will see the dog. It takes us a lot of effort to get away from these preformed judgments, change into a mindful state, and put all these interpretations, all these meaning making from our brain, this meaning making machine. Our brain is a meaning making machine, and put all these meanings back and stay with the perception and keep a distance between perception and judgment. So this is what we train people to get aware of their judgments, but go back to the perceptions, put the judgment a little bit aside, try to take a new look at things, to be more flexible, more open, to rebalance and open up from misunderstanding to not understanding and understanding, as I pointed it out in another video. We have to open ourselves up for not understanding, for not knowing, because this is the starting point of a new experience. Whenever we stay connected with our old preformed patterns, we're on the old path. But if we want to grow into a better future as people personally or as a society as a whole, we have to take the burden of schema activations, of an activation state, which is not very pleasant, but pass that through unless we build up new experiences, new structures, and then we will settle new attractors, and then we're more flexible. So this is how we can deal with our brain, our limitations, gain maybe some of the profits, but don't get trapped in our brain. Work with our brain in the best possible way. Thank you for listening for this pretty long tutorial, and maybe we'll see each other in another tutorial from our website or in one of our workshops. See you. Bye-bye.